We are gonna rank and explain every tank spec in the game for Rato the Lich King Classic. That's it, we're gonna go over every single one, how they work, their strengths, their weaknesses, and their main features, and what's the packs I would recommend you to play, so you can find what's the best choice for you. It is not Frost Decays, and we're gonna do it right the hell now. We start with the Frost Decay. Frost Decays suck balls and cack and ass and it's awful, it's awful. They are simply not worth it. They do not bring anything new to the table that other specs cannot do, and as a decay it is extremely clunky. They are easy. That's one thing, the one redeeming quality they got. They are easy, but they are awful. They are not worth even trying. And do not go Frost Decay for tanking unless you're like DPS and you want to queue as a tank too. Maybe you can make that work. Rato the Lich King dungeons are easy, but this is not a serious spec at all. So we're gonna move on to this really quick. Then you got the Unholy Decays. Unholy Decays are a lot better, even though they are not great, but they do have one niche, and that niche is AoE tanking. They have both the best AoE mitigation and threat generation of any decay spec. Aside from one other class, they are actually the best probably AoE tank for that. When you're doing like insanely big pulls, they scale very well for that. They are a lot harder to play. Decays in general, they take a lot of gear to come online, really. Like they start off very weak compared to other classes because they do not have a shield, so like it takes a long time until you get like enough parry rating and stats to like make it work very well. They do not have the numbers or the kit to really tank bosses, raid bosses reliably. So that's why you're probably not gonna see them in a raiding rat. And they are very good for one thing if you're gonna play a Blood Decay, which is what we're gonna go next. If you wanna have a dual spec and have Unholy Decay, perhaps in a more DPS build even, and Blood Decay for your main tanking spec, what you can do is like be blood for your bosses and everything, but when you're doing trash pulls, you can go Unholy and deal with the entire game that way. Like, you know, you can swap specs in Rat in the middle of a raid. Like, you can take advantage of it to be like the most optimal possible. If you wanna be like that tryhard, you can do that. Then we got the Blood Decay. Blood Decays are the strongest tank spec in Rat. And they actually, for all you that don't know, I should have explained this earlier. In Rato the Lich King, Blizzard had a vision that every spec should be able to tank. That wasn't the case after Rat because they decided it was awful, so only Blood Decays can tank from Cataclysm onwards. Blood was the spec they chose because it was by far the best designed to do that. And they are the best magic tanks in the game. They have, what's it called? They have anti-magic shell, it reduces the damage taken by 75%, the cooldown is very low. And like if you're getting hit by a lot of spells at once, it's even better than spell reflection. They have a lot of cooldowns, even though they are not the best cooldowns. They are about as good as a bear Druid defensive cooldowns. Like they are strong enough. They are competent defensive cooldowns, if you want to call it that. They are very weak early on because of gear. I just explained that. If this was fresh, Rato the Lich King 3.1, when the expansion came out back in like 2008, was it? Or 9? Whatever. This would be like the top tier tank. But sadly, in 3.345, like the client that we're gonna get in Classic Rat, they got nerfed to hell. So they are not nearly as good as they used to, thank God. They rely on self-healing to tank. They don't have a lot of passive mitigation, so to speak, like barely anything at all. But they have self-healing. Most of your survivability is not reducing the damage you take, it is more healing back the damage very fast. Which, if you have a bad healer in a dungeon, that's actually very useful. You're actually gonna do better as this and most other specs. They are very hard to play, they are very skill capped, because as I said, most of their mitigation is active, not passive, so you gotta time it, you gotta pay attention, you gotta place your buttons correctly. And you got a lot of them, a lot of buttons. And you also got Death Grip. This is true of every decay. You can pull them out like a hook, you know, like Scorpion, get over here. You can get a mob to you, and that in dungeons that's very useful because sometimes you got like a caster that is like not walking to you and you cannot hold aggro because you're doing an AoE pull, and being able to bring them to you, that is very good. And you got decent cooldowns like Icebound, Fortitude, but like I said, like they are not the best, they are just okay cooldowns. Okay, gotta move on to another one. Protection Warriors. I am kinda blocking the picture, I didn't think of this. There you go. That's a cute Torrent warrior or something. Protection warriors do not have the best numbers survivability or threat-wise. They are not the best at any of those. But they have one niche, and one very valuable niche in Rato the Lich King. And that is that they are by far the most mobile tanks in the game. They have intercept and charge, and intervene is like charge but for an ally, and you take the next hit that they take. Is like a really cool utility ability. They have 3 separate moving abilities, right? And that's not even it. They are very mobile, they are very good at that. And Rato the Lich King, there's a lot of moving in fights, especially later on in like ICC. You gotta move a lot as a tank. There's a lot of tank swaps, there's a lot of cool mechanics. And even though the prot warrior is not the best, I would say it's probably weaker than the blood decay even, the prot warrior can do mechanics very well. You know, in some fights that is even more important than being a good tank, you know, especially if you got good healers on it or something like that. You have shield wall and last stand, which is the equivalent of the Feral Bear. I forgot the name of the Feral Bear, but you just get a little more HP temporarily, and Shield Wall, that's ridiculous. That's a very good cooldown. Like, a Druid would kill to have this cooldown. You have an interrupt with Shield Bash. Most tanks do not have an interrupt, so that's also very good. You have Spell Reflection, which is good, but it is not nearly as good as Anti-Magic Shell. Although, in some fights, Spell Reflection will be a significant part of your damage. Some bosses can actually be reflected their damage too, and bosses do a lot of damage. So you can actually bounce back a lot of damage to the bosses in some situations, in very rare fights. And those fights, the warrior is ridiculously good. Like, any boss that can have a reflectable nuke, like I don't know, some bosses have mechanics that do like every 10 seconds they drop like a shadow bolt that does like 7 gazillion damage. Those are the ones that you gotta, that a warrior really shines in. The Feral Druid. I gotta say, after dabbling on it for a while, the Feral Druid really grew on me. I mean, I always knew they were strong, but I never knew how fun and good they really are. They have the highest health pool in the game because of how dire bear form scales and your talents. They have an insane amount of armor, even though I don't believe you can get armor capped in Rat anymore, but you can get really close to it. Like, your passive mitigation at least single target is ridiculous because of all the armor you got. That makes it a lot easier to, like, you can mess up your cooldowns, you can mess up your timings, your mitigation, whatever, and you're still gonna perform pretty decently as a bear tank. So that makes it perhaps the easiest tanking spec in the game. They do ridiculous DPS. It is not rare. It is not rare at all to see a feral tank top 5 of the DPS on a 25-man raid. Their AoE, their single target, they are both excellent DPS abilities, and as such, they are probably the best threat generators in the game too. They are extremely good. You struggle with mechanics a little because you don't have the best mobility. Your only ability for moving is like feral charge or turning into a cat, which is unreliable because you turn into a cat and the boss hits you, you die. But yeah, they are not the best at doing mechanics. And they have a very unreliable interrupt, which is charge. You need a minimum range to be able to charge somebody with feral charge, which is an interrupt. So, you know, like, some fights you can do it. Like, some fights you can afford to, like, move away and charge the boss and interrupt it. Most of the time you're not gonna be able to do it. So they essentially have no interrupt, which really sucks because you're at the mercy of your DPSers, and that is awful. And now for the last one, and I just realized I messed up the picture. Let me fix that right away. The best, in my opinion, tanking class in Rato the Lich King is none other than the Protection Paladin. Especially the male Draenei ones, because they are so ugly, it makes them cool. They are a lot of utility. They have hands, they have blessings, they have pretty much everything. Paladins were supposed to be like a support class all their life, and they carry most of their support abilities from vanilla and TBC into Rat, but now they are actually a great tank on their own too, so that's a twofold excellent tank to have. They have perhaps next to the Feral Druid the best AoE threat in the game. You can debate on it because, like, if you pull like more mobs than say a Feral Druid, you can do more threat than a Feral Druid could at like pulling 6 mobs, but the Feral Druid is probably gonna beat you if it's pulling like 6 mobs, so it's like a give and take situation. It is very easy too, people are calling it in chat too. It is very simple to play even though you have a lot of tools. Whether you use them or not, it doesn't really matter, even though of course you can tell when a Paladin is good, you can tell. It doesn't really affect your chances of success that much. Yeah, of course. Unholy DKs have better AoE threat and stuff, but at the same time they are not very reliable tanks for everything else, so you're probably not gonna have an Unholy DK at your raid. That's why what I was trying to illustrate. They have the best AoE mitigation in the game, They have a lot of block rating on AoE that, unlike the warrior with shield block, doesn't depend on how many times you get hit. So, I mean, it does, but it gets refreshed, so it doesn't really matter. So you actually do not get hit directly, but most of the attacks you take as a prot paladin, and that really helps. They have, and this is the main one, and this is what is gonna really change your life, they have ridiculous defensive cooldowns. They have the most and the strongest defensive cooldowns of any class in the game. I made an entire tutorial on how to play a prot paladin in Wrath, and I had to go through like 12 abilities at once just to go through them all. It's like so long, I'm not gonna waste your time on it. But yeah, like you got your bubble, you got everything. Oh my god. They scale very well too. You get like a low HP scaling, even though a Feral Druid has more HP scaling. You get a lot of HP from your talents that multiply, so you know, the more gear you get, the more return you get, and so on and so forth. They are just the best. I know, it sucks. Of course, guys, of course. Every spec has a niche. Every spec has something that they are excel at, and you know, like, you still need like a variety to pull off a really strong core, you know. Like, some fights a warrior is gonna be best because it has more mobility, some fights a blood decay is gonna be best because there's a lot of spell damage, and so on and so forth. So yeah, but I hope this guide was enough to teach you guys what spec would be the great choice for you. So thank you for watching, and if you like this video, please hit the notification bell and subscribe, because we got a lot more coming, and join our Discord. We got a new Discord, okay? It's getting cool, okay? See ya!